All right, so we have been back in the book of Job for the last couple weeks. And at first we just did kind of a review of the sections that we had covered. And then last week we got back into some that we haven't covered, into the second cycle of speeches between Job and his three friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. Now, my plan here, and this is where I had been debating exactly how to handle going through these speeches, we're going to run through it. It's going to be a little, I don't know what you would say, a little different than what I normally like to do. I guess we're going to do a lot of reading, and then I'll talk a little bit, maybe have a couple questions. We're kind of going to move through it pretty quickly. There's a lot of rehashing and a lot of similar things, so we'll see. We may get into some different topic as we go. I never know, but we'll try to just kind of go through this pretty quickly. So even though we've only covered like 15 chapters in however many weeks we've been doing this, the next few chapters we'll probably cover pretty quickly in comparison. But it's not exactly the way I like to do it normally, because I usually like to kind of have back and forth and a lot of questions. So it'll be a little bit different than what I usually try to do. But anyway, that's what we're going to do. So we're ready to pick up. We just had Eliphaz, going back with Job, telling him, that he's the problem, that he's prideful, and just continuing to show us, what may not be the best way to proceed in trying to help a friend who's struggling with things going on in their lives. So we're going to pick up with Job 16 here, if we want to do that.
Job 16. Then Job answered and said, I have heard many such things, miserable comforters are ye all. Shall vain words have an end? Or what provoketh thee that thou answerest? I also could speak as ye do, if your soul were in my soul's stead, I could join words together against you, and shake my head at you. But I would strengthen you with my mouth, and the solace of my lips would assuage your grief. Though I speak, my grief is not assuaged, and though I forbear, what am I eased? But now he hath made me weary, thou hast made desolate all my company. And thou hast laid fast hold on me, which is a witness against me, and my leanness riseth up against me, it testifieth to my face. He hath torn me in his wrath, and persecuted me, he hath gnashed upon me with his teeth, mine adversary sharpeneth his eyes upon me. They have gaped upon me with their mouth, they have smitten me upon the cheek reproachfully, they gather themselves together against me. God delivereth me to the ungodly, and casteth me into the hands of the wicked. I was at ease, and he brake me asunder, yea, he hath taken me by the neck, and dashed me to pieces, he hath also set me up for his mark. His archers compass me round about, he cleaveth my reins asunder, and doth not spare, he poureth out my gall upon the ground. He breaketh me with breach upon breach, he runneth upon me like a giant. I have sewed sackcloth upon my skin, and have laid my horn in the dust. My face is red with weeping, and on my eyelids is the shadow of death. Although there is no violence in my hands, and my prayer is pure. O earth, cover not thou my blood, and let my cry have no resting place. Even now, behold, my witness is in heaven, and he that voucheth for me is on high. My friends scoff at me, but mine eye poureth out tears unto God. That he would maintain the right of a man with God, and of a son of man with his neighbor. For when a few years are come, I shall go the way whence I shall not return. Job 17. My spirit is
was a little smoother, I think, than last time anyway. So Job, of course, responding to Eliphaz now, he charges his friends with speaking many empty words and claims that he would help them if their situations were reversed. He says they are miserable comforters, and he thought that his friends should be comforting him, but they saw their job a little differently. They thought they were there to correct his erroneous ways. So At this point, Job is tired of the argument and asks if they will stop with their empty words and arguments. And of course, they don't. In an effort to change their perspective, Job says what he would do in their place, or what he could do in their place. He may be being sarcastic. Here again, sometimes it's a little hard to tell. But he says that he would encourage them. Also, he could just be saying that he would be able to speak the same way they are if the situations were reversed. But either way, what Job is saying to them is that they need to look at things from a different perspective. As we talked about, they had on their way apparently had a conversation and decided the way things were and what was right and what he had done in this situation. They are not trying to see things from his perspective at all. They're just based on what they consider to be correct. What is it that they're missing?
A lot of things. Understanding, compassion,
Yeah.
silence, humility. Like, to me, Job's friends reminds me of a lot of religious people today who feel like it's their responsibility to have answers ready because the Bible has all the answers after all.
What do we call those people? Self-righteous, hypocrites. Sometimes, in some instances, they're hypocrites. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they are trying to follow what they're saying. I mean, it's not automatic, but
I think his friends were incredibly sincere, and I think there's so much packed into the book of Job. I think that they genuinely weren't just being antagonistic.
Right.
I think they from their hearts thought that they were doing the right thing. And Job comes back, and I look at this and think how offensive this must have sounded when Job is, indicting God, pointing his finger, saying, "You did this to me."
right, yeah, and he gets pretty.
And he was right.
Yeah, he pretty much
was right.
he pretty much is pointing right at God here at this point, right? Yeah, he's like, why are you doing this to me?
Yeah.
Oh.
Job's friend knew Job is a righteous man. Why not take him at his word? I did not sin against God.
But we see that all the time. Like what?
We don't trust other people.
Yeah.
Because, wow, I feel like I'm doing a psychological class. Because we ourselves find our own selves untrustworthy often.
How many times, like we look at it from this is going back, like you got to see it from the other person's perspective. When we look at it purely from ourselves and our own experiences and project that onto other people, we see that today, all around in society, right? Everywhere. I don't want to even go down the political road, but you just look at politics, you can see it. But we see people accusing others of what they are doing or what they think they would do in that situation. So that's definitely a part of it. What Jimmy was describing, I think, can be summed up as empathy to some degree, right? Like being able to, empathize with someone, look at it from their perspective. And it's difficult to do if you haven't ever gone through it. Sometimes it's easier to do if you have gone through something similar.
I kind of describe it this way. It's the impossibility of being able to place yourself in somebody's shoes while at the same time saying, I know exactly what you're going through. None of them can even begin to imagine
You can't.
the pain that Job is experiencing.
Can't say that. I know exactly what you're going through.
But a lot of those people, will say, I know exactly what it's like the person who's standing at the casket of their dead child, infant child. And somebody will say, I know, and I've heard people say, I know exactly what you're going through because I lost a dog, last year, and I know exactly what you're feeling. No, you don't.
Right. Yeah.
Would it be okay to smack him with that?
It should be.
So why is it important to remember to think about what things look like from somebody else's perspective or viewpoint?
Did you ask, I'm sorry that I was rubbing my eyes, but did you just ask, how me
Yeah.
ask you.
Why is it important to think about how it looks what things are from somebody else's viewpoint? Why is that an important thing for us to do?
Well, perspective, just a better understanding of what's actually going on and how other people perceive it. A phrase I hate, but I understand what they're trying to say is perception is reality.
Right.
Now, that's not true, and I don't believe it, but for the person.
It's true for the person, that it's going from. Exactly, yeah. And if we do that, if we take a moment to stop and think about what the other person might be thinking or feeling, would that help us maybe to not just go on the attack? Like, we might, when you're just thinking of it from your viewpoint, and this is something we see here again throughout society, you're just trying to prove yourself right. You're just trying to make your point instead of what is the actual reality of the situation. What is really the truth here, or what's going on? And looking at it from another person's perspective, even if they're not right, can help in how we talk to people.
I mean, and you just hit it right there. Once they've made their quote-unquote case, everything they're doing after that point is defending themselves against Job's defense of himself. Mm-hmm. So they're not just stating they have a point, they're now trying to prove
Their point, yes. Now they've gone into argument instead of trying to help.
Yep.
So if we can avoid that, that would be the better situation. When we're talking about the situation we're talking about here, where somebody's going through a bad situation and pain, we want to, and we're trying to help, we need to keep that in mind. Now, there's obviously a difference in having, although I still think the same principle applies, but there is a difference whenever you're not dealing with a major traumatic situation and you're just having a theological discussion or something like that. There's different rules, I would say, as far as that goes, but the same thing still applies in that it will help you in discussion if you can think about it from the other person's point of view. It doesn't change that fact doesn't change just because the situation isn't a traumatic situation or whatever. So I think it's important that we try to do that. So then Job, starting in verse 6, really starts, like we talked about, his complaint against God. And he talks about how God, like his friends and his wife, although he doesn't say his wife, but his friends, had turned against him. He says that it won't matter whether he speaks or stays silent. God has exhausted him, and his company has been destroyed. Who's his company? His family and friends, right? So some are dead, and some are just arguing with them at this point. So they've been destroyed, and his physical condition, he testifies against them. It's funny because he's talking about his physical condition, but his friends are using his physical condition to say, look, you've done wrong. Whereas he's using his physical condition to defend himself in this. Verses 15 through 17 talk about his circumstances and his response and how he sewed sackcloth over his skin. He's cried a lot. He has circles around his eyes. He probably doesn't look real good at this point.
And the oil's all over his
Yeah, right, yeah, he's not pleasant to look at. But he says his prayer is pure, indicating that he is innocent of any major wrongdoing. And then going on to the last part of the chapter here, he desires that there's someone to act as an arbiter to present his case before God. To cover a victim's blood was to hide the evidence of a murder. Job hopes to be vindicated even if it happens after his death. So he's kind of lost hope in things getting better here. And we talked about how he doesn't have as complete of a view as we do of after, but he's still hoping that he will be vindicated even if it happens after he's dead. He says that his witness pleads for him in heaven, and this seems to not be in reference to Job believing that God is his advocate, but that he desires for someone to defend him in heaven. So he's still looking for that arbiter. Since Job's friends on earth would not defend him, he longs for someone above to defend him. And he ends by saying that he expects to die in a few years, indicating that his ailments are not immediately life-threatening. So he's not expecting necessarily to die right then and there.
probably only because
Right? Yeah. So as we said, we see him longing for a mediator to represent him before God and plead his case. And I just thought it would be good for us to, we talked a little bit about this last week, but to go to talk about that from the New Testament. 1 Timothy 2:5. Paul, in his letter to Timothy, says, "For there is one God and one mediator also between God and men, the man Jesus Christ, who gave himself as a ransom for all, the testimony born at the proper time." And then he talks about, of course, him being an apostle for that. And then also in 1 John chapter 2, verses 1 and 2, it says, "My little children, I am writing these things to you that you may not sin. And if anyone sins, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous. And he himself is the propitiation for our sins, and not only for ours, not for ours only, but also for those of the whole world." So we see the revelation and the sacrifice that Jesus made. Of course, Job at this point doesn't have that and doesn't have the benefit of knowing that Jesus was going to come as that sacrifice. And at this point, that's not even what he's really talking about, because he's just in the middle of suffering. And he wants somebody to be able to plead his case, because
My translation may be different here, but it says, even now my witness is in heaven.
Right.
My advocate. So, as I'm understanding this, he's looking and saying somebody in heaven has already interceding. Now, he may not know it's Jesus.
Right.
But it reminds me, help me out here, Jimmy, in case I mess this up. But when you go back to Genesis, the Lord our God is one God, but the Lord our God is plural. And then it goes from the plural to is one God, singular.
I believe that's correct.
So in that case, they may not have understood exactly what that meant, but I think my opinion, purely opinion, is that he thinks there is someone already there debating with God.
That's possible. The other thing is that he's just, even now, behold, my witnesses in heaven. Like the only place, he could be saying the only place that they know in heaven. Like they know what I've done.
Yeah,
Could be going from that route, or it could be talking about something specific. The mediator that he's wanting, or the witness that he's wanting being there, is the other possibility there. Yeah, that could be as well. All right, so Job continues on here. Let's go to 17. Unless anybody else has another comment on 16 before we head on to that.
What's going on right now is just between God and the devil and Job, right?
Well, Job doesn't know about it.
Well, Job doesn't know, but God's keeping this between him and the devil and Job, right?
No.
Even though Job doesn't know, but it's between the God.
Well, at the meeting, there was a meeting, so I would assume that at least the angels know, or whoever was present at this meeting, whenever they had this little challenge.
They would know what's
Yeah, they would know. So nobody on earth, I don't think. It would be the spiritual. It's the spiritual.
It's just
Yeah.
It's a battle between God and Satan.
Yeah.
exactly. This is a battle.
Job is just
That's how I look at it.
Job's just a whipping post.
Yeah, he's just a whipping post.
Yeah. He's the tool for both in this case. All right, so let's go on to 17 then.
Job 17. My spirit is consumed, my days are extinct, the grave is ready for me. Surely there are mockers with me, and mine eye dwelleth upon their provocation. Give now a pledge, be surety for me with thyself, who is there that will strike hands with me? For thou hast hid their heart from understanding, therefore shalt thou not exalt them. He that denounceth his friends for a prey, even the eyes of his children shall fail. But he hath made me a byword of the people, and they spit in my face. Mine eye also is dim by reason of sorrow, and all my members are as a shadow. Upright men shall be astonished at this, and the innocent shall stir up himself against the godless. Yet shall the righteous hold on his way, and he that hath clean hands shall wax stronger and stronger. But as for you all, come on now again, and I shall not find a wise man among you. My days are past, my purposes are broken off, even the thoughts of my heart. They change the night into day, the light, say they, is near unto the darkness. If I look for Sheol as my house, if I have spread my couch in the darkness, if I have said to corruption, Thou art my father, to the worm, Thou art my mother, and my sister. Where then is my hope? And as for my hope, who shall see it? It shall go down to the bars of Sheol, when once there is rest in the dust. Job 18.
All right. So here again we see Job considers his situation to be hopeless and asks God to vindicate him. He says his spirit is broken and his days are extinguished. It seems that now he is thinking of his life being shortened and maybe he doesn't have that much longer to live. Kind of that going back and forth thing that we see. He considers his friends to be mockers. However, Job's faith in God comes through at this point, and he asks God to be his guarantor in court. And he thinks that God has closed his friends' minds so they can't see the truth of what he is saying. Is that accurate?
I don't think God closed their minds.
No.
I think they did it all by
Yeah, their minds are closed, not necessarily due to what God, but just they're yeah. So, and then in verse 5, he uses a proverb to warn them that if they are denouncing him so that they could receive a reward, they should be careful. And we talked a little bit about that, how, some of their arguments that they're making condemn themselves, or they don't realize that they're also, accusing them, not accusing, condemning themselves, or I forget the exact word I'm looking for there, but yeah, they're putting themselves into a bad spot there. He then complains that he's becoming an object of derision, once again blaming God. To Job's friends, he had become a lesson in shame. His condition must have caused his eyesight to deteriorate as well, based on some of the things he's saying here. And he's also become skin and bones, so he probably doesn't have much of an appetite, not eating well. Righteous people were stunned to see Job. Of course, he would have been healthy at one point, and now he's looking very unhealthy. And they would disagree. He says, surely they disagree with the way I'm being treated. However, he says that the one with clean hands will grow stronger, meaning that he would maintain his innocence. So throughout this, he's still maintaining his innocence. He continues to discuss his imminent demise as he considers the hopelessness of his situation. And he says that he finds little wisdom from his friends. And I guess here it almost seems as though he's telling them, go ahead and just keep on assaulting me. Like, just keep attacking. He says that they make night into day, saying the light is near in the presence of darkness. Job seems to be saying that the advice his friends are giving him will not accomplish what they claim, and then asks, where is my hope? He's known as an example of patience because of the way he persevered throughout these trials. However, it is easy to get caught up in the spiral of emotional collapse, and especially whenever we start getting into this kind of a conversation. His part, I wonder if part of the reason that he starts blaming God so much is because of the direction that the conversation has gone. If his friends weren't there saying, this is, God's punishing you because you did wrong, would he have turned to this line of reasoning and of discussion?
I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in the midst of any problem, it seems to me the probably most prevalent question most people have is, why?
Why? Yep.
And if that's the case, a natural human response is, why is this happening to me? I mean, we could always come back and say, why not you? But anyways,
But that probably wouldn't serve a purpose. That wouldn't help. And that whenever somebody's going through something bad, that's not what we know now. We may not be thinking of it all when we're going through that situation. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Job I mean, that's his primary question. Why?
Why?
And God, when he answers him, says, none of your business.
Right.
Uh,
And we've talked about that as far as why do things happen the way they do, and it's the world was created a certain way to allow us the opportunity to see God and to make a choice.
Let me ask you this. What was why God should have never let that happen? I don't think he should have never let this happen to Job to begin with. He's the all-powerful and the almighty. He should have never let the devil even.
Well, he's the one that suggested it. That's so to speak. I mean, he didn't say go out and destroy Job, but he pointed Job out. Yeah. Why did he?
Why did he even do that?
Well, we kind of talked about that.
Why did he want to show the devil this?
I think that's why Job is absolutely 100% correct in indicting God.
yes.
Job points the finger at God and places the blame rightly on God, which
Because
irritates
God-
the heck out of Job's friends.
Right.
You know? It
But
was God's.
yeah, and of course the funny thing here is that Job's friends, you know, as we talked about, they make some pretty good arguments along the way. They have some decent thoughts. They just don't have the whole picture. Job, on the other hand, is blaming God, which is correct to a certain degree, but he's also doing it under the wrong impression. Like he's saying, I can prove I'm innocent. Why am I getting punished like this? But he's not being punished in the way he thinks he's being punished. He's not being punished at all. Exactly.
And
So,
that's why,
yeah.
again, we don't understand. I think God said it best, you know, when he says, you cannot understand my reasoning.
right.
I think that says it all.
The one big thing that I always come back to is our view is only what we know. Like, I have this conversation a lot with different people. Like, there's a lot of people who read the Bible and like in Revelation and things like that and are looking for signs and those kind of things here. That's a whole nother topic that we're not going to even try to get into right now. I actually am reading a book on Revelation that I've read before, but I'm rereading it right now because I wanted to kind of remind myself of these things. But anyway, because they're looking at things and they're saying, well, things are worse now than they've ever been, or this or that. And I'm like, no, that's only from our perspective. We've been sheltered in the way we've lived and what we've seen. I mean, you go back and you look at history, things aren't any worse now than they were in the past. People are still just as evil as they were, or were just as evil then as they are now. There were earthquakes and there were hurricanes and there were all these things in the past. None of that's changed. We hear about it 24/7 now. And we also in America have been sheltered. We haven't seen some of the things that we've seen in our lives. So our viewpoint is, here again, looking at your viewpoint, is distorted when it comes to that. And so we need to be aware of the fact that like these things that we see going on around us, it's nothing new. And we need to know that. And Job here, of course, his viewpoint was that he kind of agreed with his friends in that if you're good, you not completely, but to a certain extent, if you're good, you're rewarded, and if you're bad, you're punished. Now, why is Job's view different? Because he knows better now. Like he knows I didn't do anything, and I'm getting slammed here. So this can't be the right way of thinking about it. But really, what's happened is that I think his frustration with his friends causes him to be a little more bold in expressing his frustration with God, to some degree at least. And we can see there again, you can see that in our lives, I'm sure. You can see times where it's like some having a conversation with somebody else might egg you on to get more angry with somebody else, or things like that. So we can see that happening, and so when we're in tough times or when something is going badly and the bottom is falling out of whatever we're in, the car or whatever it is, the boat, and we're in our lives we're in danger of crashing or going down. Like what we talked about in the past with this lesson, what are some things we can think about to overcome those things, those times? What might be some things that we can kind of have in our minds to do when those times come. Number one might be to not listen to bad advice, right? Job's friends were poor comforters. He needed to not listen to them because they were pulling him down further. They were taking him down the wrong road.
I think maybe what we ought to be doing is doing the focus on the positive things, like godly things,
Yeah. Well, and actually that's kind of where I was headed with what I kind of missed my conclusion on when I was talking about viewpoint there and stuff. It's very important for us to try to have that eternal viewpoint. That's why it's so hard for us to understand God's viewpoint. God's viewpoint is from eternity. So things that might seem bad to us may not be that bad in God's view, because at the end of the day, what does God want? He wants people to be saved, to come back to him, to choose to obey him. So if that's what's happening, and a soul is saved for eternity, that's not a bad thing. Whereas from our viewpoint, as we're going through a trial, all we know is here. And that's kind of where I was headed with talking about our viewpoint on the world is we only know here and now, and it's hard for us to think about it from an eternal standpoint. And that it is. I mean, there's no doubt that it's difficult for us to do that because we only know here. We don't know the spiritual, what it's like whenever we're no longer in our bodies or what's going to happen at that point. So that makes it hard for us to have that viewpoint. But I always, you hear me talk a lot about Paul because Paul he's the example of that, like focus on eternity. He's talking about, I'd rather go to heaven, but I need to stay for the moment to help you out. And to be here. So I think that's important for us as we're going through those kind of times is to try to have that eternal view. And that will be, I'm not saying that's easy.
Yeah, I was going to say, we hold Paul up. As I recall, Paul is the one who said that he and his companions despaired to death. Mm-hmm. When you're going through these things, and I'm talking a little personal experience, you said, what can you do or focus on? Focus is, can I get through the next minute? It's not, and maybe I'm just a bad person, but, when the bottom's falling out, I mean, falling out, when you're, I don't want to get into all that detail, but your focus is on, I need to get through the next minute. We're not even talking day. Just get through, deal with the real pain, the abandonment, you can get so overwhelmed that you can't deal with what's going on anymore. It's just trying to make it to the next minute. So, and that's, none of that is against God, don't misunderstand. But trying to think of heaven when you're literally burning up is doesn't happen. I'm
Right.
sorry, it's
Right.
not happening.
And I think that's a good point is that, when that's happening, what are you thinking of? What will you be able to do? And I think it also depends on the situation. I mean, I think there's different levels, different scenarios that are going to happen that we're going to roll through, but in life, so, but to your point, you may, there may be a fog, basically, you're saying, like you're just trying to just stick within the moment and just get through it, I think. And that goes back to, I think, once again, what we talked about before is being prepared throughout the rest of our lives as best we can for that situation when it comes. And what would be involved in that? How can we prepare for it, I guess you would say? What are some things that we can do? And here again, not saying that this is going to get you through it or anything like that, but what can we do to help with that?
Live a godly life.
Yeah, live the
Every day do what's right.
focus on doing what God wants us to do. And how do we do that? Well, there's some obvious things that we talk about. Read God's word. Live it. Actually do it. Trust in God. Build that faith in God in the good times so that we're ready for the bad times. And remember that God can accomplish his purpose in our lives no matter what's going on with us. If we try to do what he wants us to do, and we stay focused on doing what is right, then God can use us. We can serve his purpose. I also think, we talked about how it's not good to have bad counsel, but try to seek out good counsel. Have good conversations with people. Seek out people who are grounded in God and in God's word. That can help keep us grounded and encourage us in staying the course. That's why it's important for us to come together, because we can encourage each other and in our lives to do more, to serve and to try to do what God wants us to do. All right, I'm looking at the clock here, and I don't think it's probably worth trying to get into chapter 18 at this point. Does anybody have any other thoughts on what Job is saying here or on what we've been discussing in 16 and 17? All right, then we will, next week we'll pick up with 18, and that's when Bildad comes back and we get to see some more of what Job's friends are thinking about what Job has to say. So, all right, thanks for all your comments, and we'll be back in a little bit more than 15 minutes for worship.